And where does that money come from that is paid to the family of terrorists who are in jail, or the family of terrorists who are killed in action? Where does the money come from? It comes from Europe and the United States. Now, when Trump was president, he cut off all that money.
Mainstream media gives you the impression that there is nothing good about America. In direct contrast to that, my podcasts will prove by examples that America has always been and still is the land of opportunity for everyone.
Hello, and welcome to another episode in the series Life Lessons with Dr. Bob. My guest today is Yossi Kuperwasser, a former brigadier general in the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, who is now considered to be a leading expert in Israeli security and intelligence. He holds a bachelor's degree in Arabic language and literature and a master's degree in economics. After holding many different senior military positions in which he made significant accomplishments, which I will not cover today, General Kuperwasser was selected in 1992 to be an assistant defense attaché for intelligence at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C. In 1998, he became chief intelligence officer at the IDF Central Command. After 3 years in that role, in 2001, he was promoted to be the head of the Research and Analysis Division of the IDF's Directorate of Military Intelligence. In that position, he played a significant role in defining Israel's methods for identifying, locating, and dealing with terrorists. Following that, General Kuperwasser served as Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs. He currently holds several positions. He is a senior research fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. He is the head of the Institute for the Research of the Methodology for Intelligence, and he is a senior advisor to the research department at the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. IDSF is a non-political organization whose mission is to work to ensure that the priority of every government of Israel is national security, to ensure the continued sovereignty of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. That is a lot for one man to accomplish. Welcome to the show, Yossi.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. It's a pleasure to be with you.
First, I want to start on a positive note. Let's talk about the warming of relationships between Israel and some of her Arab neighbors. In late 2020, under President Trump's leadership, the UAE signed an agreement with Israel, and soon after that, 3 other Arab countries, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco, did the same. Taken together, the Abraham Accords are essentially agreements that ended the hostilities between those 4 Arab countries and Israel. I'm hoping that there will be more in the near future, perhaps even with Saudi Arabia. In 2003, Dori Gold, who was a guest on this show, a former ambassador from Israel to the UN, published a book entitled Hatred's Kingdom, in which he provided evidence that Saudi Arabia was a major funder at that time of terrorism. But things have changed dramatically in the 20 years since that book was published. As an example, earlier this year, I was invited to attend a reception in Washington, D.C., hosted by the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a conservative Washington-based think tank, where the senior executives are all Jews. And the meeting was to meet with Royal Princess Rima Al Saud, Saudi's ambassador to the United States. How does this dramatic shift in Saudi's attitudes affect Israel and the rest of the Middle East? Well, what do you think?
Well, I think that the tendency to improve relations between Israel and the pragmatic Arab states is a very strong trend in the Middle East. And it reflects the real interests of the countries involved, both Israel on the one hand and the Arab countries that made this courageous move on the other hand. And it is not to be seen as a part of a quid pro quo in which Israel has to give all kinds of things and make sure that the United States gives all kinds of things to the Arabs so that they will be ready to show some progress in their relations with Israel. On the contrary, I think it is driven by the understanding of everybody that they have joint interests and they can both benefit from promoting these relations. This is why I think that the entire attitude towards bringing Israel and the Saudi Arabia together is problematic. The idea that in order for us to have better relations with Saudi Arabia, we need to see some givings on our behalf on the Palestinian issue, or that the United States give the Saudis all kinds of presents, is a wrong attitude. It's in the interest of the Saudis to move forward towards having better relations with Israel. Exactly. They have a lot to gain.
Exactly. Both Israel and Saudi Arabia have a common existential enemy, Iran. And I assume that Israel and Saudi Arabia are working together to somehow address that threat. Can you give me some unclassified examples of how Israel and Saudi Arabia are working together regarding Iran?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's beyond Iran. The interests are beyond Iran. We are neighbors. We have a lot of things to gain from cooperation on food security, water security, and many other issues that countering cyber attacks and things like that. There's a lot to gain. On Iran specifically, yes, too, we can help each other because Iran is a major threat for the stability and security of Saudi Arabia. Israel has a formidable intelligence about Iran, and we can support the Saudis to be more capable in facing the threats coming from Iran. And I guess we cannot say for sure, but I guess this is not something that has not happened even before there are formal relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. I want to say that to emphasize here something about the future of the relations. The Saudis, I mean, you said that you met the Saudi ambassador to the United States. The Saudis are using new terminology in order to describe the way they want to proceed with promoting relations with Israel. They are saying that what needs to happen is integrating Israel into the region, including building relations with Saudi Arabia, but they separate the term integration from the term normalization. Mm-hmm. And they believe that they can see some integration of Israel into the fold of the Arab world without full normalization. We are not against it. Although I don't understand why wouldn't the Saudis wouldn't have full normal relations with Israel, but we can move in steps, in small steps. And one of the steps is better cooperation on security, sheer security matters like facing Iran. Unfortunately, as we all know, Saudis, because they are unhappy with the American policy on Iran, moved towards the Iranians and cut a deal with them to resume the diplomatic relations with Tehran. That was facilitated by the Chinese. And this is a problem by itself. But even with this, I think that this doesn't mean that we cannot move forward with Israeli-Saudi relations simultaneously.
Yeah, I think it's a real problem. It was on March 10th of this year where Saudi Arabia and Iran agreed to restore diplomatic ties after having severed them 7 years ago. So this is not good news for Israel, but I do understand why Saudi is moving slightly, toward Iran, away from the United States, because Biden has been very disrespectful toward the heads of Saudi Arabia and highly critical of them, and it's not good news. So do you think that despite Saudi Arabia and Iran have signed some sort of agreement, they still have to be very cautious about Iran, right? Iran is filled with Shia, and Saudi Arabia are Sunnis, which typically are at war with each other. And also, Iran has been backing the Houthi rebels in Yemen, which are in Yemen is being supported by Saudi Arabia. So What do you think? Do you think that Saudi Arabia will help Israel if there's going to be a preemptive attack on Iran's nuclear capabilities?
No, I don't think they are going to help Israel if Israel needs to take the necessary steps of stopping the Iranian nuclear project. But there are other areas where we can cooperate. And as I said before, you see the disagreements, the basic disagreement, the different worldviews that Iran and Saudi Arabia have are still there. And this is not going to be disappearing just because they decided to resume diplomatic relations. The tensions are still there. And that's why I think that the potential of better relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia are there. The problem is, and this problem has a big impact in the Middle East, is that the United States is less and less interested in the Middle East, and under the current administration shows readiness to make all kinds of deals with Iran. And this tells the pragmatic Arab states that they cannot rely on the United States as they used in the past for their security. And that's why they have to secure themselves in other ways. One of the other ways is getting better relations with Israel. Another way is improving relations with Iran, so that if something happens and Israel decides to take action, or, which is less probable, the United States decide to take action, and the Iranians are going to retaliate somehow, these pragmatic states don't want to be on the Iranian hit list.
I see.
And that's why they want to become closer with Iran, and we have to take this into account. I don't think they're going to support us if we going to do something about the Iranian nuclear project.
That's a shame. That's a real shame.
If we need to, we shall manage without them.
I think you have to hope for there's a saying, hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Exactly.
More on Iran. Bad news. The IEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, recently reported that Iran has enriched uranium to a level of 84%, which is very close to the enrichment level required for a nuclear bomb. And a few months ago, a lead article in the Israeli newspaper Arutz Shever, Israel's national news, says that Israel is significantly increases its preparations for an attack on Iran. Now, it's clear that the JCPOA, the Iran deal, didn't do anything to slow down Iran's quest for a nuclear weapon. And as you know, Biden is currently and has been anxious to get into another similar, maybe worse deal now. It seems that the U.S. isn't going to stand in Iran's way toward the bomb, and unfortunately, it's going to be up to Israel.
Yes, unfortunately, as you say, it looks as if it's going to be up to Israel to do something about it. The Iranians are cautious and they don't want to rush to the bomb before they are ready. Mm-hmm. So their efforts now focus on making all the preparations to shorten the time they need from the point where they start enriching uranium to 90% to the point where they have a nuclear explosive device. Nobody knows how, nor even the Iranians know how much time they actually need, but they know what they have to do in order to shorten this period of time. One thing they have to do is to accumulate highly enriched uranium to 60% and 20%, and I don't know, maybe also 80%, as we saw the 84% that you mentioned, but 60% is good enough. To move from 60% to 90%, which is the military level, they only need something like 12 days in order to use the material they have in order to produce enough fissile material for the first explosive device. And within something like 20 days, they can have enough fissile material for 2 explosive devices. And it's going to take them, as it stands now, something like 3 months before they have enough fissile material for something like 6 explosive devices.
Whoa.
This is no time. This is an extremely dangerous situation. This should not be allowed for the Iranians to remain where they are right now. And at the same time, they make progress on developing their missiles, the delivery systems of the bomb once they have it. And they already have missiles that reach Israel that can be equipped with nuclear warheads. And they are working on longer range missiles that can reach Europe. And they had a plan in the past to have a missile that can reach the United States, but unfortunately something exploded and all the people that were involved in that were killed.
How unfortunate.
That's what they have.
That's very unfortunate indeed.
Yes. And what they have to focus on right now is the process of turning the fissile material into something that can be looked upon as a bomb and mounted on a missile that is planned to carry a bomb. That's what they focus on in my mind right now. The fact is that no intelligence community has managed to find anything that reflects these activities, which means that the Iranians are doing that extremely well. Nobody knows about the whereabouts of and the details of what they're doing. The problem with the JCPOA in this respect was that the JCPOA did not allow the International Atomic Energy Agency the ability to monitor the activities of the Iranian experts, the scientists. So nobody knows where they are. Israel knew maybe some of their activities. People claim that Israel managed to reach the key scientists and maybe some others. Who knows? And some of them lost their lives, but many others are still active. And the major question is what these guys are doing as we speak. And I'm worried. I'm worried that they are working on all these kinds of things that you can deal with without having the fissile material available. On top of that, we have to remember that the Iranians managed so far to escape the need to give answers to the questions raised before them by the International Atomic Energy Agency regarding 3 facilities in which there was uranium, and the Iranians didn't even say that they have these facilities. They hidden them. And that's a major problem because they might have some uranium that is unaccounted for somewhere. Nobody knows how much uranium. Nobody knows at what stage this uranium is. Nobody knows what this uranium is being used for. And nobody cares, as a matter of fact, because the IAEA says, okay, we didn't get the answers, but we go on with business as usual. And as long as they don't get the answers about this uranium that is in the hands of the Iranians since 2003, God knows what they did with it. This is a very dangerous situation. So I'm quite worried about where we stand with the Iran nuclear project. And the JCPOA was about to allow them to have as much 90% enriched uranium as they would developed and enriched by very modern centrifuges without any limitation by 2031. What we are dealing with now is the mini deal that would allow the Iranians to keep everything that they've accomplished so far and keep moving towards 2031 without any interruption, which is like, what? What kind of a deal is that? And on top of that, they are going to see the sanctions lifted and they're going to get more money. This is really strange, if not crazy. So I sincerely hope that the Americans are not going to adopt this kind of strange policy and give Iran everything they want. For the time being, the Iranians are a little bit deterred because they understand that if they cross the 90% enrichment level, Israel at least is going to do something. So they getting closer and closer, accumulate more and more uranium, but don't cross the line, don't cross this red line. And what the Americans are suggesting is that they can use this policy until 2031 very, very easily. And then in 2031, which is tomorrow morning for any practical purpose, they can move towards having 90%. And this is going to be totally legal, totally legitimate. This is really dangerous. I hope it's not going to happen. For the time being, when they are where they are now, at least they have to be cautious. And if they manage to break through, if they start to break through, they're going to have only a small amount of explosive devices and maybe bombs. If we follow the American recipe, the Iranians are going to have hundreds of bombs by 2031 or soon after.
No, but you indicated, Yossi, earlier on in the discussion that they are months away from having enough fissible material for a nuclear bomb, not
Days away.
2031.
They're
It's not
days
2031. That's 8 years away from here. And a lot of people will go to sleep over that time period. But you indicated it's a matter of months.
No, they can have enough fissile material for the first explosive device within 12 days.
Within 12 days. So
Yes.
the 2031 is a meaningless date, right? It's a meaningless date.
Yeah, but the difference is that today, if they do that, they do something that nobody accepts, and who knows, Israel might do something. The United States even might consider doing something. But if they follow the agreement by 2031, they can do all of that totally legitimately.
Right.
Nobody can say anything.
This isn't Iran. But Iran isn't a legitimate regime. It's run by these theocrats who every day are still preaching death to America, death to Israel. Is that correct? They're still holding these rallies, right? Death to America, death to Israel.
Sure, and then the best way to deal with this matter is that if the Iranian people overthrow this regime and replace it with a regime that cares about their welfare and not about killing the Americans and killing the Israelis. That's the situation right now. They spend their money on the nuclear project and supporting Hezbollah, and supporting the Houthis, and running all kinds of marches where everybody's chanting death to America. And this is where the resources of the Iranians are going. I hope that the Iranian people one day will rise up. We see today a lot of instability in Iran. And I hope someday the people of Iran will rise up and do something about their regime.
It's obviously difficult to see how you can rise up when you don't have weapons, right? Unless the military overthrows the theocracy.
Fine with me.
Right.
But
are there still? I haven't been keeping up on this.
People go out to the streets of Tehran. Even the Basij and the IRGC will have difficulties reining in the crowds.
I see. Are there still large protests happening in Iran?
Less than before, but there are still protests, and the fact that there are less protests allowed the regime to resume the activities of the morality police, and this is going to raise again the dissatisfaction of the population, and we'll see what's going to happen.
Okay, turning to another enemy, the Palestinians, or the PA. Mahmoud Abbas has been head of the Palestinian Authority for 18 years. He is now 87 years old. And I've read that the PA is losing control of the West Bank. What happens after Abbas?
Well, first, frankly, nobody knows. Because there's no prepared system and process to replace Abbas. He's been in charge for 18 years now, and he made sure that there is no successor to him. So recently is preparing Majid Faraj and Hussein Sheikh to replace him when he leaves. But these people are weak and lack any charisma. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they're going to be able to stay in power for a long time. So there's going to be a lot of instability that may end up in chaos in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. There are all kinds of scenarios that can happen. One, the scenario we all would like to see happening is that the PA somehow manages to stay in power and under the leadership of Majid Faraj and Hussein Sheikh, and we continue to mow the grass and live with the Palestinians with the current situation. This really very problematic situation is the best we can hope for,
right,
at this point of time.
Right, a bad situation is the
other
best.
Alternatives. Sorry.
A bad situation is better than a terrible situation.
Yes, exactly. Terrible situations are total chaos that
Right.
would force us to take over the Palestinian territories again, where every landlord runs his own small fiefdom. That is a very plausible scenario. Another scenario is that Hamas is going to try to take over. Mm-hmm. This is a clear situation from Israeli point of view because we are not going to let this happen. And These are the major scenarios. Of course, under the scenario that Fatah stays in power, it doesn't necessarily going to be Hussein Sheikh and Majid Faz. It can be also Jibril Rajoub, Mahmoud Dakhlan, Mohammed Dakhlan, all kinds of people that have aspirations. All of them are preparing themselves very intensively for the day after. Mm-hmm. All of them accumulate arms, and they prepare themselves for an armed struggle, each against the other. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm saying that the scenario of total chaos is amongst the most probable ones.
Let's discuss the dramatic change in the relationship between Israel and the United States. With President Trump, Israel had the best friend that it ever had in the White House. Trump was instrumental in the Abraham Accords. He moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He agreed that Israel had sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and he opposed the right of return that the Palestinians continued to demand. But now Biden is in the White House, and I believe with Obama pulling his strings, the relationship with Israel is back to where it was during the official Obama years. Here are some examples of the souring of the relationship. In October of last year, a maritime agreement was signed between Israel and Lebanon. It was brokered by the U.S., and it forced Israel to sign the deal, which many in Israel say that it is nothing less than paying protection to Hezbollah terrorists. Yossi, give me your views on that maritime agreement. And is it true that the U.S. pressured Israel to sign it?
Well, I think this maritime agreement was a big mistake. And I wrote about it at the time, and I said the repercussions are going to be that Hezbollah is going to feel much emboldened, and it's going to put pressure on Israel and other issues as a result of that. And all of that just happened exactly the way I prescribed it. It's a mistake, because we were arguing with Hezbollah for 10 years about where the maritime boundary should be. And all of a sudden, just because that's the way it seems, just because Hezbollah launched 3 UAVs towards our facilities, the gas facilities in Karish, Israel decided to give up all its demands, all its positions, and succumb to all of Hezbollah/Lebanon demands. And many people think, and there was even a reference to that in Haaretz. Aluf Ben, the editor of Haaretz, wrote it, that the Americans called the Israelis and told them, do that. And personally, I believe it's true. I don't know if it's true or not, but personally, I believe the Americans were involved in that as well. And all of a sudden, Israel accepted the entire position put forward by Hezbollah. This is amazing.
Now let me understand this. Israel discovered the gas fields, and the area in the Mediterranean where the gas fields are is within Israel's territorial waters. Is that correct? They had discovered it, and it's in their territorial waters, right?
Well, let's clarify what is where. The Israeli discoveries that are now operational and produce gas are in Israeli territory, and there's no dispute about that. There was another potential gas field that was going to be excavated, and it's called Cana. And part of it is in Israeli waters, and most of it is in Lebanese waters. Now, the question in the disagreement was how much of this field is in Israeli territory and how much is in Lebanese territory. Israel has agreed to have the line south of Cana, and leaving all of Cana actually in the hands of the Lebanese, which under an agreement that says that the part of Cana is going to be in Israeli territory, the income from this part as a percentage of the entire production of the Cana field is going to be given to Israel. And this is going to be worked out in the future. It was supposed to be worked out, it was not. And this was the agreement. The oil field or gas field, that Israel operates remain under Israeli territory. Nobody, not even Hezbollah, claimed that they are part of Lebanon.
I see.
So there's no problem with them. But we gave something by moving the line southwards.
Yes.
We actually gave the Lebanese something like $4 billion a year.
I see.
If Cana is really going to be operational and they're going to really find gas over there, according to the estimations that we have today, then Israel gave Lebanon $4 billion a year. But it's not about the money. It's about the process. Giving up all your demands, giving up the territory that you claim sovereignty in, just because Hezbollah threatens you, means that you are deterred by Hezbollah, that you are afraid, that you're not willing to confront Hezbollah. And this plays into the hands of the Iranians, of Hezbollah, of Hamas, of everybody else,
of course,
who says that Israel is deterred and weak.
Of course. Now, that was a different government. And 1 second, that I want to make it clear to our viewers that was a different government than Netanyahu that made that decision.
Yeah. These were the last days of the previous government of Lapid at the time. By the way, even Bennett even that government, as long as it was led by Prime Minister Bennett, refused to all these demands of Hezbollah and maybe the Americans. Only towards the end of the term of this government, really in the last hours of this government, they reached this agreement.
Okay, but I want to make sure I understand it. That field is not yet in production. Is that correct?
No, it's not. It's years away from being producing gas.
All right, so maybe we can renegotiate the deal, right?
No, I don't think that we can renegotiate the deal. This is a done deal. Unfortunately, that's what it is.
Let's change the topic. Let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. The Russian-Ukrainian war provides another example, in my view, of the U.S. pressuring Israel to do something that is not in Israel's best interest. For months, Israel has been providing humanitarian, but not military aid to the Ukraine. And Israel does that very frequently, providing military aid providing humanitarian aid even to our enemies. But it's been under pressure from the U.S. and other countries to provide military assistance as well. Yossi, I just don't understand why the world is, once again, ganging up on tiny Israel. As we all know, Israel has plenty of military challenges on a daily basis in its own backyard. It simply can't afford to get involved in other countries' wars. And another reason against helping Ukraine is that Ukraine has not been a friend of Israel. I've checked Ukraine's voting record regarding Israel, and I discovered that it's dismal. Since 2015, there have been a total of 133 proposed resolutions against Israel in the UN General Assembly. Ukraine abstained in 21% of those resolutions, and it voted for those resolutions. That means they voted against Israel 79% of the time. Bottom line, in the past 8 years, Ukraine has never casted a single vote in favor of Israel. What's your read on this issue, and why does the West, including the U.S., continue to criticize Israel for not helping Ukraine in a military matter?
Well, Israel is a part of the West. It's a part of the liberal world and the free world, and clearly that's where we stand. And since the West is fighting now for gaining more and more support for Ukraine and allowing Ukraine win the war against Russia, everybody looks at Israel and expects it to share the burden and give some support to the Iranians. To the Ukrainians. The fact is that we do support Ukraine, and we not only humanitarian aid, we give also some defensive measures that may help the Ukrainians very much in their effort to avoid the impact of the Russian attacks. And one other reason why we helped the Ukraine in this respect is that Iran, our enemy, is helping Russia. So it's another reason why we definitely stand on the side of Ukraine. That said, the expectations from Israel to do more than what it does are unjustified, because Israel has to keep certain working relations with Russia. We have Russians on our border in Syria. We have to make sure that our arrangements with the Russians allow us to take the necessary steps against the Iranian entrenchment in Syria are not hampered by what is happening in Ukraine. And that's the case. So far, more than a year after the war started, we are maintaining the good coordination with the Russians in
Syria.
Yeah. And we also, coming back to what you said about who votes for whom, it's not that the Russians vote for us better voting record they have than the Ukrainians. But we still remember that in many sensitive situations, the Russians came to our help.
Yes.
And the most important case was when Obama wanted to pass all kinds of resolutions in the Security Council just that day where he was already a lame duck. The Russians prevented the United States from passing resolutions against Israel in the Security Council.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know
we do owe something to the Russians to Putin in this respect, and we remember that. So, and there are, of course, the issues of that have to do with the Jews living in Russia and so on and so forth, all kinds of special things that are unique to our relations with Russia. That's why we have to make sure that we don't cause unnecessary troubles with Russia.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, the Americans understand it, the Europeans understand it. I think the pressure on Israel in this respect is not that heavy. The fact is that this has been our policy under the previous government. This has been our policy under this government. Everybody understands that this is a policy that is not contested in Israel. Everybody in Israel understands that this is what the policy we should adopt.
Good. Let's discuss two very recent and important events in Israel. First, the recent military operation in Jenin, and then let's talk about the very complex political divide in Israel. First, Jenin and fighting terrorists. The Israeli military conducted a major assault on the Jenin refugee camp in the Palestinian city of Jenin. The campaign took 48 hours and was the largest military operation in Jenin in more than 20 years. The Israeli government stated that the goal of the operation was to dismantle the state haven that Jenin has become for militants. Now, first, can you make it clear that what a refugee camp is? It's not a camp with tents and everything. It used to be 20 years ago, but now describe what the real status on the ground is when people refer to the Jenin refugee camp.
Oh, it wasn't a tent made of tents for more than 70 years now. It's a neighborhood, a dense neighborhood. But houses, small houses, relatively speaking, and very dense. That's what it is. A small neighborhood, suburb of the Jenin town, to the west of Jenin, and it's a small area, heavily populated by the descendants of people who left Israel back in 48.
I see.
That's what it made of. And by the way, there are many such refugee neighborhoods in the Palestinian controlled territories, and which is something very strange, because the idea that they are referred to as refugees after 75 years is ridiculous. They are living in the areas controlled by their own people. They are not refugees. And by the definition of a refugee by the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, these are not refugees. They will be a refugee after for 2 generations maybe, but not more than that. Many of the people there are already 4th generation, something like that. There should be a solution for them inside the Palestinian territories. Unfortunately, the Palestinians refuse to do that. What they do is exactly the opposite. They eternalize the suffering of these people. They make sure that they are committed to what they call the return to their homes in Israel, and make them committed to the ongoing struggle, including the military or the armed struggle against Israel. And there's no wonder that the main places from which terrorism comes are the places where the descendants of the refugees live, like the Jenin refugee camp.
Yeah,
That's,
I think that the New York Times and the left-wing media continue to call it a refugee camp, so that it appears to the world that that mighty Israel is attacking these people living in tents. I mean, that is the impression that one gets when you use the term refugee camp. It's not a refugee camp at all, from what you're describing, from what I've read. It's a neighborhood of Jenin in which most of the people living there were descendants of refugees, and they probably lived there then, even before the War of Liberation. At any rate,
I can tell you, I'm speaking with some people living in what is termed refugee camps, and I said to them, "You are doing pretty well. Why don't you leave the camp?" And they say, "Well, we enjoyed it. It's a good living." No, but I think that it's not the case in most cases, and Israel was ready more than once to help the Palestinians improve the living conditions in those so-called refugee camps. Mm. We were ready to give the Palestinians territory in order to build better housing for the people living there. They insist on not doing that because they want to keep the victimhood, they want to keep the commitment to the struggle, and this is what they spend their money on. That's their education, that's their communication system, that's everything. That's their media, everything they do is there in order to keep these people committed to the struggle against
unhappy
Israel.
And angry, right?
Yeah, including paying salaries to the terrorists. You know, the worst thing they do is they pay by law really handsome salaries to terrorists who spend their time in Israeli jails for their terror attacks, or to the families of dead and injured terrorists. That's what the Palestinian Authority is doing. So,
and where does that money come from? That is paid to the family of terrorists who are in jail, or the family of terrorists who are killed in action? Where does the money come from? It comes from Europe and the United States. Now, when Trump was president, he cut off all that money.
Israel. Some of it comes from Israel itself. It's unbelievable, but some of it comes from Israel itself. Well, fortunately, the United States and Israel adopted laws in 2018 that are supposed to limit their support to the Palestinian Authority as long as it continues to pay salaries to terrorists, what's called the pay-for-slay policy of the Palestinians. But none of the United States or Israel, neither Israel, really went all the way with this policy. So the United States, under Trump, really stopped giving money to the Palestinian Authority. But the Biden administration found all kinds of ways to circumvent the law. Mm-hmm. They don't break the law. They don't give the money directly to the Palestinian Authority, but they give the money to all kinds of entities that rely on the Palestinian Authority. And by that, allow the Palestinian Authority to have money that should have been spent on something else used in order to pay salaries to the terrorists.
Okay, well, getting back to the operation in Jenin, was it a success, Yossi?
Yes, I think it was a success. As I wrote in a paper in Israel, I think that we might need more of these. It's not the end of, we didn't finish with terrorism. There's going to be more, but it's conveyed a clear message to the Palestinians everywhere, and especially in the area of Jenin, that we are not going to tolerate these terror attacks, and there are going to be a heavy price exacted from them for continuing to carry out these attacks. And I think that they got it. The Palestinian Authority, following this operation, entered the refugee camp and is trying to behave as if they are going to handle the problem I hope this is going to last for a long time, but I'm worried that it's not. At least, anyhow, everybody got the message. Everybody got the message that Israel is serious in its readiness to take the necessary actions, and that it can, if necessary, take such action that is going to make it more difficult for the terror to operate from these territories. But it's too early to say how long-living this impact is going to be. It's too early. We are less than a month away. Let's see what's going to happen in 2-3 months. If nothing changes, we shall have to act again and to carry another such operation.
Now, I've read that there is a new terrorist group in the West Bank called the Lion's Den. Do the Palestinians really need another terrorist group? Don't they already have 3 or 4 of them? What do you know about the Lion's Den, and how is it different than the 4 or 5 other terrorist groups that Israel has been fighting for years?
Well, it's not much different. It's another organization made of people from the existing terror groups. Each one of them is affiliated with some other terror groups or close to another terror group. But this allows the Palestinians to convey the message that they are fed up with all these organizations, especially with the Palestinian Authority and with Fatah. And they want to be acting on their own merit. And this is the message of the Lions Den and of the battalion of Jenin, that was the battalion against which we took the action in Jenin. And there are many such new organizations on local basis. But it's not against the existing groups. It's some sort of resentment, but not really coming against these groups. And what's happening is that the Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad cooperate quite a lot with these groups like the Lion Den or the Jenin Battalion, because for them it is another layer of deniability. So they can say, well, the Palestinian people are doing that on their own initiative. It's not something we did. You don't punish us if they are worried about Israeli reaction, and they are. So this is an invention that is to the benefit of everybody, and everybody is happy with this new idea of local groups.
I see. So they don't take responsibility.
At the same time, I must say that Israel has to deal with the core of the problem. The core of the problem is not only mowing the grass and killing the terrorists once they are carrying out an attack, which is something we have to do all the time. The basic issue is to deal with the incitement, with the hate indoctrination. This is where they get their fuel from, and we have to do something about that. Unfortunately, we do very little.
I've heard rumors that Fatah, the controlling group in the West Bank under the leadership of Mahmoud Abbas, is concerned about Iran's recent influence in the West Bank, and that it might have even been cooperating with the IDF against these Iranian proxies. Is there any truth to that rumor?
Not really. They are concerned with the Palestinian groups that try to challenge them. Some of these Palestinian groups get support from Iran. The Iranians were very proud to say that the Jenin Battalion, for example, that is being supported by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and by Hamas, was actually supported by them. And since these groups challenge Fatah and challenge, they don't challenge Fatah, they challenge the Palestinian Authority. They actually cooperate with Fatah, but they challenge the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority felt a little bit unhappy with the Iranian activity. But from there to cooperating with Israel against the Iranians, this is we're not there yet in my mind. And what the Palestinian Authority is trying to do is just the opposite. They're sometimes trying to find ways to communicate with the Iranians so that this help is not going to be directed against them, but it's going to be directed in a way that is coordinated with them. And this is what we should worry about.
I see.
We all remember the Cana, the big attempt to have a big shipment of arms from Iran to Yasser Arafat back in 2002. The Iranians and the Fatah are not on two different sides of the struggle. They are most of the time on the same side, unfortunately.
Tough situation. We'll take a short break to make time for a message from our sponsors. Welcome back to the conversation with today's guest, General Yossi Kuperwasser. Over the years, there have been a number of terror attacks in Israel carried out by individual Arabs. A very recent example is that during the recent Jenin battle just a few weeks ago, an Arab rammed his car into pedestrians near a Tel Aviv shopping center, injuring 8 of them. He then jumped out of his car and started stabbing civilians. Now, fortunately, an Israeli civilian who was armed drew his gun and killed the attacker. It seems to me, Yossi, that given the number of threats from terrorist groups and from individuals, that more citizens in Israel should be allowed to have guns. But as I understand it, the current law regarding gun ownership are very restrictive. As I understand it, an Israeli can only apply for a license to carry firearms if first he has been a combat soldier in the IDF, and even then, only if he has a valid reason for a gun license, such as living directly on the border or in the disputed territories. Is that the correct status of now of getting a license, of an Israeli citizen getting a gun license?
Well, without going into the exact details of the law of permitting people to hold arms, yes, the law is restrictive, and there are all kinds of elements that you need to pass before you are allowed to have a gun. And yes, we are actually checking these days the option of allowing more people to have guns, lesser restrictions, and I hope this new policy is going to be approved. It's in the making.
Yes, I'm in touch with and I support a particular group that is lobbying the government to change the gun law to make it possible for any civilian who served in the IDF, even in a non-combat role, but any civilian that served and went through basic training should be allowed to carry a gun.
Anyhow, anybody who gets the permit has to go through all kinds of training with his gun. He has to go to range and so on and so forth. You have to resume the permit every 3 years and show that you did all kinds of practice with the gun.
Sure.
You know how to operate it. It's there's a big room of improvement in the rules that are practiced in this respect.
Well, I think it's crucial. Living in Israel is sometimes living on the edge, and people should be able and capable of defending themselves. Finally, Yossi, let's discuss the very complex political situation in Israel. It seems that Israel currently has the same divisive situation that currently exists in the United States between the right and the left. Half of the country on one side and half on the other. In the U.S., it's a split between those Americans who view their country as very special, where everyone is given an equal opportunity to succeed. And the other side are Americans who view their country and who have been taught that America is inherently racist. Now, the split in Israeli society is, of course, based on different factors. But what are the major differences in your country between these two opposing large groups in Israel?
Well, the differences in Israel is really different to that in the United States. We have a competition between the two parties, the right and left, about the question of who is more patriotic. It's, everybody raises the flag, the Israeli flag here. It's, if you see somebody with a flag, you don't know if he's from the right or from the left. So it's this is not the issue here. We have an issue called Bibi, and half of the population hates him and half of the population admires him. And we are divided on that. And this has created a situation where people from the center, center-right, and of course the center-left find it impossible to sit together with the center-right party of Netanyahu. And this led to a situation where there's impossibility of cooperating on anything, and this disbelief and distrust between everybody on both sides. And on the extreme sides, especially on the left-leaning side, there is a cult of people who believe that the end of democracy is about to come, and terrible things are going to happen, and the personal rights, private rights of individuals are going to be harmed, and all kinds of things that have nothing to do with reality. But they really believe in it. It's like a cult. You can't convince them this is not the case. And that's why many of them go to the streets. And as we speak now, there are demonstrations on both sides, big demonstrations on both sides. And the worrying thing about it is that part of the people on the left have decided that because of their distrust in the government, and they believe that the end of democracy is about to happen, they would not serve in the military anymore. All kinds of reservists decided, especially the pilots, decided they're not going to serve in the military anymore if the law about the reasonability issue is going to be passed. It's crazy. It's dangerous. It's irresponsible. It puts Israel in danger. It puts themselves in danger. The dangers coming from Hezbollah and from Hamas and from Iran are against everybody in Israel, not only against those who support Netanyahu. And I think I think that the military should be kept out of the politics. This didn't happen in the United States, I must say. In Israel, the situation has become so bad that the military has found itself in the middle of the political debate. And I think this is something terrible, because it's going to affect the ability of Israel's military to perform its tasks in the future. Right now, it's not an immediate threat. But in the future, this can happen. And you are in a position where you ask everybody who comes out of the military, on what side are you? I spent 35 years in the military. I never knew what was the political position of anybody of the people I was working with. And all of those people who are now showing some readiness to understand and sometimes even support the idea of refusing to serve in reserves were people that served together with me. Some of them were my commanders. Some of them were my colleagues. It's unbelievable. And fortunately, there are many people in Israel who oppose this approach. And I hope those who are in favor of that will wake up one day and come back to their senses, because it's an insane situation right now. I'm extremely worried.
Well, in the U.S. and the Europeans, anybody on the left has been critical of the changes that Netanyahu's cabinet have been proposing for modifying the judicial system to make it more like Americans' judicial system. But they were still criticized for doing away with democracy or something. It doesn't make sense. But what are the problems, the major problems that the current government under Netanyahu sees with the judicial system? And what are the changes they want to make?
First of all, I want to quote from what President Herzog said in the American Congress a couple of days ago.
Yes.
He said, the Israeli society cannot become undemocratic because democracy is in our DNA. And you see what's happening with all these demonstrations, so on and so forth. This is democracy. Israel is a very vibrant democracy, and it's an example of democracy, especially in an area where you don't have any democracies. But even in respect of Western democracies, I think Israel is a wonderful democracy. Now, what Netanyahu is worried about is it's less Netanyahu. It's more some other parts in his party. Yariv Levin, the Minister of Justice. He's worried that today, in the last 30 years, the Supreme Court has taken for itself, without any legislation, without any proper process, all kinds of authorities that are problematic. For
Right.
example, they have the ability to say, well, I don't think it is reasonable for the government to do this and that, and because of that, I'm not going to approve that. But your opinion is not better than the opinion of anybody else, and you don't go to the public, to the population every 4 years and ask for approval for your activities. So how come your opinion is more important than the opinion of the government? That's the problem that we are dealing with now. Another problem that, and by the way, on that everybody agrees. Everybody agrees that this has to change. There's a disagreement about how exactly to do the change, but there's a wide agreement that the change is necessary. So it's really ridiculous. The other issue is the way we appoint judges, especially in the Supreme Court. And there's a feeling that the judges of the Supreme Court justice, almost all of them come from the same social part of the society.
Let me just interrupt. Let me just interrupt for a minute. I think, as I understand it, there are 15 judges on the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right? And
15, yes.
they select the next ones to replace themselves. So it's not like in the United States.
They don't select. They have three. They have three of them sit on the selection committee.
Yes.
So the selection committee does 3 judges, 2 lawyers, and 3 members of the 2 members of the Knesset and one minister. That's the 2 members of the Knesset are one of the opposition and one from the coalition. And this provides under the current situation, the majority of the members of the selection committee come from the center left. So it's the government's trying to find a new way to select judges, and that would guarantee that judges that represent other parts of the society will be selected as well. By the way, I heard today President Biden very proud of the fact that he has appointed 114 new judges during his term so far, and that 2/3 of them are coming from minorities, and 2/3 of them are I don't remember what else, which also reflect the fact that in the United States as well, the 2/3 of them are women, and 2/3 of them are coming from the minority.
Very important. Very important.
Which is reflecting the fact that in the United States too, there's a feeling that there's a lack of balance, proper balance between proper representation of all kinds of walks of the society in the courts. That's exactly the same problem that we face here, and there's an attempt by the government to change this selecting committee. This, of course, creates a lot of opposition by the people who don't want to see a change. So this is another issue. These are the 2 main issues that stand right now on the agenda. There was another issue of whether the Knesset can override decisions by the Supreme Court, and what kind of majority is needed for that to happen. But this is being postponed for the time being, and it's not going to be discussed. These are the 2 issues that are now going to be discussed. One is discussed and going to be voted on tomorrow, and the other is going to be discussed probably in the coming future. And the message here in Israel is that this kind of decisions should be taken with wide agreement, which makes sense. We need wide agreement. But it's difficult to get this wide agreement. That's because the 2 parties disrespect and distrust each other, and this makes reaching an agreement between them almost impossible. We see it as we speak. I don't know. I'm speaking with you. I can't follow the developments that take place in the Knesset, but there's an ongoing effort to find a compromise on the issue of reasonability. I hope they find one, but it's not going to be easy.
The final topic for today is the very recent speech, just a few days ago, by Israeli President Isaac Herzog to the joint session of Congress. I was there in the Capitol building, and I was one of the many people who enthusiastically applauded during his presentation. There were more than 20 standing ovations, not only by the guests in the gallery, such as me, but also by the politicians from both houses and from both sides of the aisles, Republicans and Democrats. It was really heartwarming to see the warm reception that Herzog received. But there has been some criticism from conservatives both here and in Israel about his remarks. I'm sure that you've read his speech. What did you think about it?
I didn't read the speech. I was watching the speech, and had I known that you were in the audience, I would have looked for you, tried to find you. I think it was a wonderful speech. I liked almost every word of it, clarifying that Israel is not going to allow Iran to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
clarifying that we have expectations from the Palestinians. He raised this issue that I was talking about before about the pay for slay and the need for the Palestinians to change their ways before we can make peace with them. That we want peace, but we can't make peace unless the Palestinians change their way. Clarifying that what we need is peace with Saudi Arabia, and he didn't speak of any payments that we should pay in order to have this peace. It's a good peace for everybody, and we should move forward with it. I think he may touch on many, many topics, and he did that in a proud way, and specifying the important role of the ironclad relations between Israel and the United States. He did an excellent job, I really think so. And as I said before, the thing that caught my ear most was when he explained that DNA of Israel is a democratic DNA. So you don't have to worry about Israel becoming undemocratic. All this nonsense about Israel becoming undemocratic, and we should do this, and we should cut aid, and we should look at Israel as an apartheid state, and all this nonsense that coming from certain circles in the United States should stop. When I look at the messages that President Biden is allegedly delivering through Tom Friedman, I say to myself, what's going on? I know President Biden. He's basically a friend of Israel. He may have criticism of Israel, but as the president said, we are able to get criticism and live with it. It's anti-Semitism that we cannot accept. And President Biden should know better that Israel is not going to lose its democratic nature and its democratic DNA. We can have arguments. We can disagree inside. That's the virtue of democracy. But we are not going to lose our democratic DNA. Don't worry.
Well, the issue that I would differ on, you say Biden is a friend of Israel. I think what is more accurate is Biden was a friend of Israel. That's when Biden was an actual intelligent or intelligently speaking human being. He is no longer that, Yossi. Biden is an empty shell who is a puppet of Barack Obama. Barack Obama is in charge of the U.S. government today. And it appears to be Biden, or on paper, Biden's in charge, but that's not the case. And getting back to the speech, I thought the speech was fine, but underneath it all, I was uncomfortable because Herzog is a figurehead. He doesn't represent the Israeli government, nor does he represent the Israeli people. It should have been Netanyahu who was invited to a joint session of Congress. It should have been Netanyahu who delivers a speech. But because Obama's in charge, Obama would not allow Netanyahu to give him that privilege. And that's underneath it all. I'm very uncomfortable with the current trend of America's view toward Israel, because as you remember, Obama during his second term was demeaning to Netanyahu. I think he hates him individually. I think Obama is a Jew hater. I'm not going to say anti-Semite. That's too clean. Obama hates Jews, and therefore he hates Israel. And I hope that the Israeli government understands that it cannot depend on the United States in many ways that it used to depend in the past. Whether they were Democrats or Republicans, the government of America stood by Israel. But that's when the American government loved America. I don't think that's the case anymore. We are being governed, or I would say ruled, by individuals, mainly Barack Obama, who hate freedom, who hate America. If you recall, during Obama's first term, the first thing on his agenda was a world apology tour, apologizing to all the countries around the world for the mistakes or the bad conduct of America. Now, someone who loves America would not start off his term as president apologizing for America. There is nothing for us to apologize for. And I think it's a very bad situation, not only in Israel, but it's a bad situation for loyal, patriotic Americans to be ruled, not governed anymore. We're being ruled by executive orders, which aren't laws, and those are put in place by leftists who hate this country.
The character of Biden, Obama, which I cannot analyze, and their policies, okay? I have problems with their policies. And I think that, by the way, I wrote a piece about it. If anybody wants to see it, it's in The Atlantic. I published it in The Atlantic some years ago when I explained what are the differences between Netanyahu and President Obama. And they have totally different worldviews, and that's true. And the worldview of Obama and Biden is such that transpires through their policies. And the policy is that they are not ready to confront radicalism, certain kind of radicalism, extreme radicalism, they are ready to confront, but less than extreme radicalism, they not only don't want to confront, but they are ready to live with. And this is something that is problematic. And Israel is a realistic country, doesn't understand what are the dangers of radicalism, and is ready to confront radicalism, especially the Iranian radicalism. And this is the big difference. And because of these differences in opinion, the Democratic Party, led by Obama and Biden, has disagreement with Netanyahu and translated into all kinds of actions again, to send a message that we don't like your policy. And one of these things is what we see now. And they keep dreaming about this two-state solution. Sometimes they remember to mention 2 states for 2 peoples, but most of the time they forget. And this is something that's not going to happen as long as the Palestinians don't change their policy. Trump tried through his plan to convince the Palestinians to change their narrative, to change their attitude towards Israel. We have to keep moving in this direction, keep putting pressure on the Palestinians, but I don't see that coming from democratic administrations in the last couple of cases. And this is a big problem because as long as the Palestinians see no pressure, they keep sticking to their narrative that promotes terrorism and the hatred towards Jews. And we pay the price. And when I see Blinken and then Ambassador Knights refer actually to the terrorists we kill in order to protect ourselves at the same equal terms with the victims of terror, I said to myself, what's going on here? I mean, okay, you say it to the Palestinians in order to gain their trust, but we hear too. We listen to what you're saying and we hear it too. It's a pity that this is the case. And so we have difference in policies. It's not I don't take them as Jew haters. I think that they have a certain worldview that is translated into policies that are dangerous for Israel. That's policies that Israel don't agree with. And I do agree with you that Biden should have asked Netanyahu to come to Washington long ago. We are the best friend of the United States around the world. We have strategic ties. We share interests together. We share values together, and such good friends. This should have been transpiring through the warmth that Biden knows how to send to Bibi if he wants. Unfortunately, this has not happened in the beginning of the Netanyahu government. Now they're planning to meet, and even now there's a question of whether he's going to ask him to the Oval Office or not. Come on. This is your best friend. Ask him to host him in the Oval Office. Where do you want to host him? In a remote alley? This is ridiculous.
No, it makes perfect sense to me because, again, Obama hates Netanyahu. And Obama hates America. There's no other reason for what is happening, for America's positions in the world today. It's because Obama wants to help enemies of America. Yossi, why did we leave behind $50 or so billion of war material in Afghanistan? Maybe you couldn't ship it out in time, but you could destroy it. We left it behind because we're helping enemies of America. Why did Obama enter into a deal that gave Iran billions of dollars in relief and actually billions of cash? I remember seeing the pictures of pallets of cash being loaded onto aircraft to be sent to Iran. Why did we do that? Because we were helping enemies of America. When Obama, 2 weeks before he took office, he spoke to a huge crowd. This is the first time. And he said, we're about to start the fundamental change in America. A fundamental change of America. You can go hear that video, and people applaud. We don't need a fundamental change. He wanted a fundamental change, and that is exactly what has happened for the past 2 years of his administration, and now we're in the third year of his administration. It's a fundamental change to destroy freedom, to destroy the free enterprise system, because Obama hates America. Obama was raised as a communist. That's another story if you look into it. And that is his goal, and that's why Netanyahu hasn't been invited by Biden to the White House, because it's Obama who hasn't invited Netanyahu to the White House. So you can comment, but that's the way I see it.
Okay. Anyhow, the relations are problematic.
Right.
There are problems in the relations. This is not problematic.
Right. So Israel, the bottom line is Israel has to be always ready to defend itself without anybody's help. And it's a shame, but that's the way it has to be. That's the way it is.
I must tell you, last time I was in Washington, I was meeting with a lot of senators and the congressmen. And they all asked me, what is Israel going to do about the Iranian nuclear project?
What is America going to do?
What America is going to do? Nobody thought that this is a legitimate question, what America is going to do. Nobody expects America to do anything. This is crazy. Definitely, we have to be ready and preparing ourselves to do something about it. Otherwise, it's going to be too late.
On a positive note, which is the way I'd like to end it, I was in Washington last week, and I heard from many senators and representatives, and I want you to know, and the people of Israel to know, that you have great support among many of the senators and Congress people in America. They love Israel, they're supportive, and they always will be. And in particular, I was at an event, the Summit for Christians United for Israel. The Christian community, in particular an organization called CUFI, Christians United for Israel, is 100% and has been an unwavering friend of Israel, and we lobby on behalf of Israel. And I just hope that more conservatives get elected to Congress and to the Senate, and perhaps even to the White House.
More friends of Israel. That's what we need. Yeah.
Yossi, thank you for spending time with me today. And thank you so much more for the 40 or more years that you dedicated to the security of the state of Israel and your current efforts to help Israel defend itself in even the newest battlefield of cyber warfare.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Dr. Bob. Thank you for hosting me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Life Lessons with Dr. Bob, please subscribe and you'll be automatically notified of future podcasts in this series.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Life Lessons with Dr. Bob. If you enjoyed these interviews with some of today's most influential thought leaders, please follow and rate the show on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget, you can also watch each episode on YouTube as well. We'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate reading your comments on YouTube and social media, and now you can submit your questions on my website as well. Head over to lifelessonswithdrbob.com and click the question tab at the top of the page or the one on the right side of the screen, and let us know what's on your mind. I'll answer your questions at the beginning of each episode, so let it rip. Let's have some fun.